The special committee of the whole budget discussions meeting to order at 1 p.m. for October 21st, 2024. Sharon?
Please note, council meetings are streamed live and recorded on YouTube. Attendees acknowledge that in accordance with Section 17(2)(g) of the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, names, addresses, and other details provided when speaking at a council meeting will be publicly shared. Should you have any questions related to the collection or disclosure of personal information, please contact the Legislative and Advisory Services Division for the Town of High River by sending an email to foip@highriver.ca. That's FOIP@highriver.ca.
Thanks, Sharon. I'll ask for a motion from Councillor Kinghorn that the Committee of the Whole adopt the agenda for the Special Committee of the Whole Budget Discussions meeting October 21st, 2024 as presented.
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. You have my motion.
Thank you. All in favor? Carried. 2025 Balanced Budget Review. Chris, David, Michelle.
Just to recap before David and Michelle get started on recapping, just want to go through the follow-up action items that we've got noted to make sure that Council's still aware that we're working on them. One is the Lynham Canal. Looking at the budget scope to paint the Lynham Canal Bridge. So we're going to try and get that. I don't know when that will be ready, but that was one of the follow-up items. The second one was to look at the bridge going to the golf course and the Happy Trails. There were some concerns about the condition of that, so we're taking a look at that. And then traffic counts on 112th and 64th Streets. We're taking a look at trying to coordinate those so that we can understand traffic movements as well as the type of traffic that's moving along there.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. This is our third of three scheduled discussion meetings for Budget 2025. In terms of next steps and future meetings, on November 12th, we'll return to Council for budget adoption, discussion of budget adoption. On November 25th, we will bring to you the 2025 rate bylaws. On December 9th, we will bring to you the 2025 supplementary assessment and 2025 operating line of credit bylaws. And then next May, we will return to you with the 2025 property tax bylaw. In terms of the agenda for today, first item, we will offer some additional final comments on the tabled balanced budget that you have before you. We'll then move into refresher discussion on municipal taxation and a framework around that. Item number 3, we will introduce a discussion on rates and fees, and Ms. McLean will drive that conversation with you. And then we'll hand it off for the final agenda item, capital and special projects, to CAO Prosser, and then we'll identify next steps. So that's the agenda for today. So first agenda item, the balanced budget review. And we're just going to go quickly through these items. As previously noted, the budget before you is balanced as required under the Municipal Government Act. You have up before you on the screen the starting point, which is the budget net surplus, 4 adjustments at $3.65 million, and of course that's the residual of revenues minus expenses. From that $3.65 million, we deduct payments on long-term debt of $960,000, and then net transfers to reserves, $2.69 million approximately, and that gives us our balanced budget for the year. In terms of debt positions, so going back to the principal payments and long-term debts of $960, in terms of debt positions for end 2023, our debt totaled $4.6 million. This will be reduced to $3.5 million by the end of 2024, leaving $41 million of the available $44 million debt capacity, or 93% of total debt capacity for future borrowing. In terms of the net transfers to reserves, at $2.69 million. As you will recall, Council adopted the new reserve policy this past March to create 4 large reserve pools. Number 1, tax stabilization reserve for about $6.8 million. Number 2, the Community Infrastructure Reinvestment Fund for Asset Replacement for about $8.1 million. Number 3, the Utility Reserve for about $10.5 million. And number 4, the Developer Offsite Levy for about $7.2 million. So consistent with the new reserve policy, 100% of the net transfer to reserves, or the $2.69 million, will be directed to the utility reserve. Okay. So how did we get to that revenue minus expenses to give us the $3.65 million? As previously discussed, from a revenue position, net municipal taxes, we increased new construction taxation by about $90,000, up to $200,000 compared to 2024 budget. And the budget before you has no new taxation. So we have left that at 0, giving us $15.642 million in net municipal taxation. In terms of other revenues, that went up about 3.62% to $18.178 million. And that includes increases to various fees and rates that will be discussed in our November 25th meeting. So total revenues up 2.53% to $33.82 million over previous year. In terms of expenses, also as previously discussed, the labor, salary, wages, and benefits went up about $1.2 million over previous year, or about 7.42%. And again, as we noted last meeting, the 7.42% is the cost to run the entire staffing program and is not the increase to staff-based wages. Okay. Other expenses went down about $420,000 over previous year, or about 3.21%, and that is simply as a result of cost containment conversations with departmental holders, departmental budget holders, making sure that their budget request aligns to the strategic focus of the town for 2025. So total expenses, $3.17 million, or 2.67% increase over previous year. So revenues minus expenses minus our debt payments minus our transfer to reserves, all of it going to utility reserves, gives us the balanced budget as you have before you. Any questions?
Councillor Kinghorn. Thanks, David.
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. Are you going to get into a discussion about the mill rate further on, or?
That's the next discussion, yes, sir.
Thank you.
David, sorry, just rewinding a bit, the tax stabilization reserve amount, what did you say that amount was?
Under the new reserve policy, tax stabilization should be about $6.8 million.
That's what it's currently sitting at, correct?
That is what it was sitting at the end of 2023.
Okay, thank you. No other questions. Continue on. Thanks, David.
Okay, second agenda item was municipal taxation framework. We introduced this slide last year as a reminder of how we go from tax rates or mill rates to tax revenues. So if you will recall, we take our mill rate as defined as the tax rates expressed using a multiplier of 1,000 per dollar of assessment, and that happens in May when we come back to you with the annual bylaw. We take the mill rate multiplied by the assessment value. So for 2024 assessments, that's what's going to drive our 2025 taxes. So the mill rate multiplied by your assessment value gives you your gross taxation. From that, we deduct requisitions, so that includes payments directly to Alberta School Foundation, Christ the Redeemer Schools, Westwind Communities. That averages about 29%, and that gives us our net municipal tax, which is also called our tax revenues. Okay, so just a reminder on the framework that we introduced last year. So some tax scenarios and impacts. So as I've mentioned, the current balanced budget, we have made a 0% increase to taxation. We've assumed that there is no increase. But what you have before you is a schedule of, should council wish to increase 1%, 2%, so on and so forth, what the total tax revenue increase will be, and then the residential impact annually and monthly. So if I could get you just to look at the right-hand side, that last column called scoop, and what we're looking at there is under a full scoop, so we're assuming that assessment value increases about 7%. If we were not to change mill rates from what was previously set last year, that would give us tax revenue increase of about 4.95%. And with each 1% change in tax revenue, that generates about $155,000, or each 1% change in tax rate gives us $155,000 increase in tax revenue. And so that right-hand column assumes that we do not reduce mill rates, and any increase in taxation as a result of increase in assessment, we would retain that within the town. And so the revenue opportunity at the extreme using a full scoop is about $767,000, consistent with the right-hand column, or per resident, about $176 for the year, or $14.60 per month. So what we're assuming is the average assessment value increases from $445,000 to $476,000, or about $31,000 based on a 7% increase in assessment value. That is the scoop. On the left-hand side, we have 1%. So should council increase our tax revenues by 1%, that equates to gross taxation of about 1.4%. And if we assume again that the assessment values are going up by 7%, we will be able to reduce mill rates by 5.6%, just approximations. And at 1%, the annual cost to each homeowner, assuming an average value of $476,000, the annual cost is $25, or monthly $2.10. And at 1%, we would generate tax revenues $155,000. Again, we've assumed 0% up to this point, but that gives you a sense of, as we go and increase our tax revenue percentages from 1 up to full scoop, the impact on the residents based on average assessment value of $476,000. Okay. For last year, if you recall, our tax revenue increase was about 2.2%. And gross taxation, that translated to just about 3% when we factor in requisitions. Okay. So we can come back to the schedule as you decide should we increase taxation or not, but we do have this framework that we can reference. So from a historical perspective, we have reduced mill rates each year over the past 4 years. I have not put 2021 in there, but that went down by 1%. So if you follow the schedule, the larger bar on top is the assessment value increase. So for 2022, it went up 8%, 23, 8%, and 24 was 11%. And the bottom green bar, that's the mill rate change, how we were able to reduce mill rates. So for 22, we went down 6%, 23 we reduced mill rates by a further 4%. And then 24, we reduced mill rates by an additional 8%. Okay. So how did we get to the 8% if we focus on 24? Well, the assessment value went up by 11%. We increased tax revenues by about 2.2%, or municipal taxation by about 3%. And it's simply the difference, 8%. And so we reduced mill rates last year by 8%. Okay. Any questions? Go ahead, Chris.
So I was going to ask if there's any questions.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just curious, for our own edification going back, I think we did not impose any taxation increases in 2022. And then it was it a 2, just help me remember, was it a 2% in 2023? I'd just like to remember where we landed in the last couple of years.
So last year we increased 2.2% tax revenues. And the year before that, I believe it was 2.4. I could be, we'd have to check. But it was certainly a lot lower or a lot less than the increase in assessment values, which is why we were able to reduce mill rates to the extent that we were. Mm-hmm. Any other questions?
Councillor Kinghorn.
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. I'm going to back up a little bit. I was at a board meeting about a week ago, and one of the board members challenged me to state what the mill rate would be for 2025 taxation year. My belief or understanding is that we won't know what that mill rate is until we get the requisitions from the province and from the school boards. So my answer to his question was no, I don't know. And then I got a further follow-up email saying that it was almost irresponsible of me to not know what the mill rate will be in 2025. Can you please, for me, re-educate myself and the public exactly what that means? Thank you.
So thank you for that question. The change in mill rate is a factor of not only the requisitions that we get from the province, it's also a factor of the taxation rate change that council wishes to adopt. So based on the schedule, tax rate scenarios and impacts, we are fairly confident that assessments will go up by 7%. Should council wish to increase tax revenues by about 2%, our mill rates will decline by 5%. Simplest math.
However, that doesn't take into account the school board or the, what's the other one called that the government
The
takes?
requisitions?
Yeah, the requisitions. So we could say, from our perspective, it's 1.1 or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. But until we get those numbers from the province, we can't be firm on that. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Thank you.
No further questions. Continue on, David.
Okay, so we're just going to have an initial discussion, introduction to rates and fees. We will come back to this a few more times before we bring the bylaw to you. But at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Ms. McLean, who's going to walk you through a couple of slides and an example of a couple of scenarios. So, good. Mm-hmm.
Sorry. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Just around the rates, right now, they're looking at, there's been a sort of movement recently toward setting up community group funding agreements. So they're all being done through a fee-for-service agreement, which has allowed a little bit more planning around them because they are scheduled out over time. Additionally, now there's been an increase in other revenues, is estimated around 3.62%, and that's looking at changes to the rate bylaw. And that's going to come up in the November 24th. I think that's maybe the 25th. That's going to come forward at that meeting. So a 1% increase in the net tax revenue, for each 1% increase in net tax revenue is approximately $156,000 increase in revenues, and a 1.4%, it's an increase in mill rate? Increase in mill rate. And as in the earlier slides, they're looking at an average assessment around $476,000, which is up 7% or $31,000 from the 2023 average of $445,000. So this will change the revenue for existing taxpayers. The revenue being taken there will be up from just under 15 million in 2024 to just under 15.5 million in 2025, and then an additional 200,000 in new construction. So the change in net municipal taxes is 1.3%. And this other revenue here is now the 18.2 million, or 3.62%. So back in 2024, the rate bylaw was left unchanged from the 2023 numbers to allow administration and the department managers to do a more in-depth dive into those rates and trying to match the fees with the service levels. The 2025 process is nearing completion, and we'll be prepared to start proposing rates in November. We actually anticipate that there'll be a deeper dive maybe going in for the 2026 process once we have the new ERP in place that will allow for a little bit more detailed information and cost tracking. One thing that we are proposing for this year is to split the rate bylaw into 4 schedules, those being utilities, parks and recreation, permits, and general. This kind of separates things into a little bit more similar rates so that you're not looking at quite as large of a chunk of everything, and it might be a chance to sort of move those. For this year, they would all be passed at the same time, but there might be an opportunity to look at them separately throughout the year and see if that gives a little bit more focus to each of those sections. And then also, should anything need to be amended, it's also a smaller document to deal with. I'm just looking at some of the, utility basically for some scenarios on the rates and fees. Looking at the flat rate for any of the services, most of them, recycling, water, sewer, and storm, have about 5,400 users. So each $1 increase in the flat rate will of course increase the revenue by $5,400 for each of the 6 bi-monthly billings, and that would be $32,400 over the course of the year. And the garbage actually has slightly fewer users, so it would be 4,800 users, and a $1 increase would result in 28,200 annually. On the consumption side, though, consumptions ranged from about 38 million to 48 million gallons for each 2-month or bi-monthly period. So each 10-cent increase in the rate per cubic meter would bring an additional $378.50 per million gallons, which is 3,785 cubic meters. So between 14,380 and 18,170 per billing cycle for water and sewer, and that would be around $173,000 annually. And the other thing that could also be revisited or considered is that the town is currently using winter averaging, which potentially reduces residential sewer consumption fees to recognize outdoor usage during the summer months. And at the current rate of 1.96 or $1.96, every million gallons used but not billed is $7,420. So over a season of, say, 10 million gallons, say 2 million in the first couple of months, 6 million through the hottest part of the summer, and 2 million in the fall, would save around, or would bring in an additional $74,000 that we're currently not collecting. So I'm not sure if there's any questions on just that very sort of, it's a very high level review, and there's maybe the potential to do a deeper dive another time into the utilities and into the other service fees.
Thanks, Michelle. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just curious, if we're using our winter averaging, do we know roughly how many of our community are snowbirds?
How many which, sorry?
How many of our community would be snowbirds? Because I think that would drastically impact the quantity of
Of the water.
water used and water consumed.
I'm not sure that, I don't believe that's anything that we're currently tracking. Is that something we could possibly come back with that number?
I would be curious to know what that difference is, because I think it would be significant. Yeah, thanks.
Councillor Kinghorn, our newest snowbird.
Future snowbird. I'm there in mind already. We stored approximately 5,400. I thought our residences were around 6,500 homes. Is there some homes that don't have water and sewer assigned to them? Like, it seems like that number's a little light to the number of residences we actually have in town.
I can double check, but that's what was showing when I kind of looked through the water bills, was around 5,400 users.
Maybe my
I might have
number's
been looking
wrong
at
on
this
the
one at
64 or
residential.
63, but I thought that was the number of residences we had. So
yeah.
I could be off too. I'm just wondering if there is a difference there. And if there is homes that do, or places that would qualify that wouldn't be billed.
So the 6,500 is the taxable properties that we reference every year. This is a different kind of metric that we're going to get more intelligent on as we start out the ERP and start a little bit better data analysis. But we can certainly go take this back and come back to council and make sure we bridge that gap of about 1,000 that you're highlighting. Yeah.
And to add to that, there are some differences between some of our residential uses. We'll have a bulk meter at the property line, for example. So a strata development or an apartment structure will have one meter within that structure, not individual meters for those residences. So that's probably the difference between taxable properties as well as utility accounts. And that also, the taxable properties also includes the vacant properties that we currently have in town as well.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One more question, my apologies. If you go back up to slide number 13, I'm just curious for the, I think this was mentioned at a previous meeting, but just for today's clarity, can you explain why the new taxation on the, I guess it's the third one down in 2025 is assumed at zero or showing zero?
Our responsibility is to bring to council a balanced budget without putting taxation, incremental taxation on the ratepayers. That's a council decision supported by the information that we provide to support various programs and whatnot. So we will always bring to council a zero increase to base taxation and then look to council for direction as to where they want to go with that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and that Just so you know, Kelly, like that's bounced back and forth a few times over the years as to whether we allow administration to bring back their wish list and show us what that tax impact would be, and then but it's difficult to kind of rein that back, and I much prefer this. Give us a zero, and then we decide if we want more or need more for projects, for recycling, whatever it might be, right? So, Councillor Walsh?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question regarding the same page. The information shown covers 25, 24, 23, but nothing in the years prior. My question is, we've seen a significant correction in our housing market, and so we should be seeing a greater tax. How does that reflect as our property taxes? People are saying they're getting higher, result of our property values going up.
That is correct. Yeah. So the reason for the increase in dollar taxation that you see on our bill is simply a result of the increase in the assessment values. Mm-hmm. Next year, we're projecting 7%. Previous year was 11%. Mm-hmm. But what we make sure is we just retain sufficient to support the balanced budget. Okay. And the differential, we reduce mill rates. And so that's why on that graph you see going back 3 or 4 years, we have every year reduced mill rates, taxation rates, mm-hmm. but there's still a residual that we retain based on council's decision for tax revenues to support programs. Mm-hmm. But because the assessment values are growing at a rate that is a lot faster than what we need, we reduce our mill rates.
So it's reasonable to assume that we'll now start seeing that level out. In the last couple of years, somebody may well have seen an increase of $100,000 mm-hmm. in their property value. Yeah. And so we have people living because they're comfortable where they were, but all of a sudden it's, so communicating that to the general public so that mm-hmm. they see there is a relief there and they're not just paying more.
Right. Right. And so, we always refer to the average assessment value when we do these calculations, mm-hmm. understanding that different areas of the town will have higher than the average and lower than the average. And so they might see higher bills than what we're reflecting here or lower taxation bills than what we reflect here. But we simply go on the average.
Thank you. Is it possible to receive the information showing how our property values have changed with all of that to what we're now seeing in revenues, how the revenues showed?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, we can bring that back to council.
Thank you.
No further questions. Continue on, David.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. At this point, first of all, before I move forward, just wanted to highlight, so the 2 examples that Ms. McLean gave is just to give you an idea of the different calculations that we are going through in finance as we look to bring back an updated rate bylaw to you for the end of November. So that's just 2 components of it. All the other stuff that you see in the rate bylaws, we're going through similar calculations because at the end of the day, we've already priced this into our budget, other revenues going up by 3.62%. So the substantial change over previous year, and that will be supported in part by the change in the rate bylaw. And that we'll come back to you on. So on that note, I will hand the briefing back to CAO Prosser to look at our capital once again.
No, fees and rates aren't always that straightforward, right? Like there's input from the user groups that we still have to collect over time. But there's also, when we talk about tax rates, one reason why we present the balanced budget to you is that allows you the flexibility to set tax rates for a project that may be on the capital list that you wish to see completed. So that's kind of one reason why we try and present that balanced budget and try and find the money to make sure that we're balanced, so that gives you the ultimate flexibility to make choices when it comes to the capital side of things. Now, we're starting to really understand our assets and understand what that impact is. In a perfect world, what we should be contributing towards our asset renewal, and I think that's a hot topic considering what's happening, what we're seeing in Calgary, what we're seeing in Montreal, what we're seeing in Vancouver and the bigger cities, and the impact and really the value of council lobbying provincial and federal governments stronger to get more funding from them to fund infrastructure replacement. As a scope aspect of things, just infrastructure replacement, annual investments in a perfect world, if we were asking for the right amount, would total in the range just for buildings and facilities and roads, for example, would be about $14 million a year. In a perfect world. Well, we know the world's not perfect. And we know that the taxpayer only has so much to bear, and that's why the importance of lobbying from that asset replacement stuff. Municipalities are really good at getting the longest life possible at every piece of infrastructure we have. Yes, every once in a while we buy a lemon, and we have to live with the consequences of that lemon for a period of time. But for the most part, we do a pretty good job on extending the life to its maximum capacity. And so when we think about fees and rates, we've got to think about that asset management piece as well, and whether or not council wants to dedicate funding directly into asset management, especially on the roads, bridges, and buildings that we own, because they're the ones that are forgotten. Utilities are in a pretty good shape, to be honest, and will continue to be in pretty good shape. So that's kind of my bridge into the capital conversation and what we want to try and do this year. So we know what the carry forwards are going to be, continuing to be. We're continuing on replacing the water treat or upgrading the water treatment plant. It's not replacing it, upgrading it to meet the permitting requirements dictated to us by the Alberta environment. We've got the town farm rink construction. Construction-wise, we're looking at about $750,000, so that's an increase of increase about 150 from the Safford properties that was left over, but we can also downscale that project to fit better within the budget too by reducing the size of the project. Sidewalk replacement, as a reminder, is going to be a carry forward from the gas tax money. The 2024 projects, we received 0 bids. So they're going to go back out for bid in early January, so for early spring construction. And this is mostly along the 12th Avenue corridor where we have tree roots and uneven surfaces to see that asphalt pathway system replaced. Next slide, please. This also will be seeing the 9th Avenue or 9th Street missing link in the southwest. This is the corner that goes past the church, ties into the 12th Avenue pathway that was built as part of the Southwest or the 12th Avenue revitalization project. And we also have the Rio Vista Disc Golf Course that we're waiting. It looks like we're getting really close on provincial approvals, and hopefully we'll meet the construction window of this fall or early spring. If not, we have to wait until the fall again next year to do any construction crossing the canal. And then, of course, we've got the BSRC renovations and aquatics expansion that is currently underway. Now, we talked a lot about roads last time, so we've got some work to do on the road aspect of things. 112th Street East is an upgrade. We did some quick calculations, and Riley, you did some quick calculations on the maintenance costs that we've spent to date.
Correct. So we did run some very quick numbers based on the hours we're typically out there and some of our contracting costs. Our annual costs on that road is roughly $150,000 a year. That does make quite a few assumptions. For example, that the grader costs $200 an hour. But as an internal resource, our cost is probably less than that, but that is the road builder rate, and we don't have an exact cost for internal equipment. So there are a couple assumptions like that in there, but yeah, we're going to be in that ballpark. it's going to fluctuate from year to year too, depending on potholes and conditions and things like that. But
So Riley, how would that compare to a strip of road in town here somewhere, I don't know, maybe 12th or something like that? How would that number compare? Are we really spending a lot of money on that road compared to other roads, or is it similar, or is it, you know, I don't know. Do you?
I didn't do that analysis, no. A lot of that is driven by condition, and I can tell you the grader does spend quite a bit of time out there compared to other roads, even when you look at our lanes or something along those lines. I would expect it's higher, but I'd have to run an analysis on that.
No, not necessarily. I was just wanting a general feel. Thanks.
My feeling, it's high.
It's high. Yeah.
Any more questions about 60 or 112? It likely, as well, is strategic infrastructure or planning program eligible, because it is a regional corridor and would fit that description for future upgrades. And that would be if we were going to go to the full build out. I would suggest that we take advantage of the funding to go to a full build out, not necessarily one of these three scenarios that you see, because this is all three scenarios here are some function of gravel road, not asphalt and full service road corridor.
Councillor Nychuk.
Thanks, Mayor Snodgrass. The full build-out is a concern for me because we have an ASP under development right now. So the road may or may not stay. May or may not stay for a few years, may or may not stay for 25 years. Who knows how those folks are going to do what they do in that area or how that development will come along. But I'm conscious of if we spend to build a road that will handle, if you want to call it regular traffic, which we've already directed there by building the roundabout. I guess I want to see where everybody else is lying on this, I mean, in terms of council, but the full spend concerns me. What can we get away with, and what does the get away with support then in terms of traffic? Because I brought up last council meeting concerned about heavy truck traffic on that road. And could we possibly mitigate by providing weight restrictions so that we don't beat the heck out of the road, so to speak? So my trouble with understanding this and where we spend is, what do we get for the spend? Can we control the traffic that's on the road for the length of time that we think it might take to get the ASP done, and then understand a development build out that might happen? I know that's really crystal ball, but if we were to spend a whole bunch of money and rebuild that road from the ground up, and then we're going to go ahead and we're going to tear it up 10 or 15 times to accommodate water and sewer and power and whatever else, then, pardon the expression, we've got a shite road at the end of that we spent millions of dollars on, that now is going to undulate and dip and all that kind of stuff because of the nature of our climate, right? Anytime you touch a road after you build it, it doesn't lend well. It's always a constant go back to and fix after the fact. So that's where I'm struggling with the spend on this. I'm more leaning towards the gravel solution, gravel and oil or whatever that might be, rather than a full build out. But happy to hear what anybody else's thoughts are on it.
And, you know, any gravel road we build, structure-wise, will always have maintenance with it, right? It'll always have a degree of maintenance. It's not going to be maintenance-free. There's going to be grading that's going to have to take place each year. There's going to have to be additional material brought in each year. So you're still going to have that core maintenance that you have to do, whatever standard you built that to under a gravel perspective. If my advice, considering that we're going through the ASP, My recommendation would be to keep the status quo for now. Wait to see what the ASP has to say. If we have to do the odd zippering of those two little lengths, it's only about a $32,000 cost. Then we do that on an annual basis, and we keep the annual maintenance budget accordingly to reflect that. Then once we understand exactly what the future of that neighborhood's going to look like, then we can make better informed choices of what that actually will look like.
So, it's mind-boggling. Prior to us annexing, absolutely nothing was happening out there. Nothing. So we annexed it, and we went as far because the homeowners couldn't agree on anything. So we said, okay, we need an ASP in this area, partially for this road, partially for just what the future and how that whole piece of land is going to work within the boundaries of High River now. So we moved the ASP forward. We're doing that. A lot is happening out there for those residents, and we're pushing it forward, and we're pushing it forward really quickly, actually. I am not in favor of touching that road other than status quo maintenance that we're doing on it right now. To dynamite it and even just re-gravel it, there's only two little sections that are actually a problem. It would be an absolute waste of money to do anything on that road other than status quo maintenance at a bare minimum until that ASP is done and we have a clue as to what that's going to all look like. So I'm out on this one. Brenda?
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. My feelings are similar in that there's too many unanswered questions in that area for us to start spending a whole bunch of money on things that would appear permanent, which we know can't be, to zip or improve it. I think that's important because it has to maintain some function. Like, we can't just leave it with massive holes in it like it is. So doing what we need to do to keep what we have, and knowing that we're working with the, hopefully with the residents over there or landowners, and build out the area service plan to support, as you say, a longer term plan. And I think also the importance of road restrictions and access that way is really important. And then we have the other two projects that the 64th Street one, is that also applicable with the STIP grant? Can we use the two grants for the other two items, I think is the real question, and make those happen?
That one we don't think is a regional corridor, so it would not necessarily meet the definition of STIP.
Thank you.
And 12th Avenue paving, while that's a regional corridor, it talks about long-term maintenance. We're getting clarity. I've asked for clarity from their administrator about whether or not resurfacing portions of it constitutes eligibility for STIP.
I see. Well, I guess in principle then I'm agreeing with the others that we shouldn't be doing a whole bunch to 112, but I would like to see us utilize the grants and funds that are available for whatever projects they're applicable to.
And that would be our intent. After the ASP is done, then we'd have a much better vision for 112 that we could submit a much more complete proposal for STIP. And potentially qualify for more money depending on what the allocation that the province provides on an annual basis.
Councillor Smith?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just curious because according to Riley's calculation, we're looking at about $150,000 a year spend currently on 112th. So in this assessment here, the $125,000 is to do the zip, gravel, and oil in the spaces that it needs it. Is that what that is referencing between the 65, 125, and 1.25?
Do you remember, Chris?
Pardon me?
Do you remember? Or were you nodding to me to go ahead?
I was nodding to you to go ahead, but yeah, I think the 125 is the zip, just the gravel portions.
Yeah, I don't think it had any surface on it, so I think it was just zipper it and gravel.
And oil. Zip, gravel, and oil, yeah. Sorry.
Okay.
Because the return to gravel was the 1.25?
Yes. That's coring the whole road out, digging it down, proper pit run, proper road base. So you're digging the entire road down, and we don't know what the future may be of that, what that road looks like.
Because I remember when we were looking at doing the Hamptons connector, that it was at least $1 million to go through that section, or that was the anticipated cost, right? To go from the traffic circle north. When I said, could we not just keep going and resurface that space, but because we had to redo the road specs, or we didn't have those?
I can't remember that conversation. I have to go back through my notes to confirm.
Okay, so I guess my question really is, if we spend the 125 on the gravel, oil, and zip, does that take away the need for the constant 150,000 a year in maintenance, or that's just going to add to it, or keep it?
You would still need maintenance costs. It may not be as big for a couple of years, but it's going to come back quickly. It's more about a service level.
But by that time, presumably, we'd have an ASP in place and a clearer direction for the whole corridor. Is that correct?
Ideally. So if you zipper and oil and you have a better surface for 3 or 4 years, hopefully you can keep your maintenance costs a little lower and generate lower complaints.
Okay, because I just don't see the point of spending $150,000 a year if the 125 would fix it, or at least buy us some time until the ASP was finished.
You're still going to have to do maintenance on it.
Yeah,
You're still going to you're still going to be out there grading it. Maybe not as frequently, not once a week. Maybe it's once every 2 weeks or once a month, but you're still going to have to be out there grading it.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm going to kind of cut to the chase on this one. Is 112th a yes or a no to stay in the capital plan for 2025?
Hang on, I had Councillor Barton. Question before here.
I don't have that board yet.
Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify, because I think you'd said this to us last time. STIP grant is only available for one project per year.
Yes.
So if we did, for example, 12th Ave paving this year, and we did 1/12th next year, we could still apply for STIP grants for both.
Could still apply. Doesn't necessarily mean we're going to be successful, because we're competing with the rest of the province.
Okay.
So, and there's a limited allocation that the province actually puts into that fund each year.
Okay, thanks. Now you can cut to the chase.
I was going to say, for STIP, for Resource Road, if that's the stream you're going under, it's every other year.
Yeah, this would be a regional road, so I think it's annually.
Okay, sorry, I just wasn't sure which stream.
Yeah. So 112th, yay or nay?
Councillor Nychuk?
I'm a no on the big fix, but since we put the traffic circle in, and because of that, we are seeing increased traffic on that road. Just gravel seems to me to be just a little bit less than it. Like, does oiling it help, Riley? I don't want to spend a bunch of money, but I also realize that we've increased traffic on that road. So there's do you oil the gravel to keep it down? Does that improve the quality of the road at all? Do we put weight restrictions on that road so we don't have heavy truck traffic going into the industrial area? They have the slip ramp off the number 2 to get into that area, but I believe I've seen vehicles using 1/12th to get into the industrial area. Well, I know because the school also tells me that they have big trucks passing through the school zone, which to me is like absolutely ludicrous. But so a couple of things there that I would keep it status quo, but can we improve the nature, because we've gone ahead and we've increased the traffic flow there because of that roundabout improvement. So
yes, oiling would help. Even adding a bit extra gravel above what was anticipated might help as well. Just trying to bridge and strengthen what's there on top of the organics. Weight restrictions may be hard to enforce, so like a 90% axle or a 75% axle. So we might look at other tools like an axle ban or limiting the number of axles. I think that's a conversation internally we have to have in terms of what makes sense from an enforcement perspective, but definitely something Public Works would like to do. If Ollie wants to come up and speak to it, sure.
Riley, I'm just going to throw something out there. How much millings do we have in storage right now? Asphalt millings?
I'm not sure actually how much we used. I don't know how much is left over.
Okay.
They aren't of great quality.
Michael, I'm just going to go around, and I got Brenda and Jamie here. Which way do you want to go? 65, 125, or 1.25? So the 65 is the zip and grade, right? I'll go over to Brenda.
Thank you. So I think it's pretty clear. Everyone's saying we don't want to spend a bunch of money when we're not knowing what we're doing. So my question really is, Riley, in your opinion, to maintain the level of service, where do we sit? None of us want to spend any of the three numbers that you have there. But what I would like to know is, what do we need to do to maintain the level of service?
You're doing the 125.
Thank you. Sorry.
And further to that, Riley, that 125 that we're going to spend on that road, is that included in your operational budget, or is that going to be an amendment to the operational budget?
That's in addition to. And I should clarify, the 125 is only going to buy you a couple of years.
Yeah, but
This
you
just
said that's
defers-
each year we're going to spend 125 maintaining that road.
No, the 125 would be one time.
Oh, okay.
But we
so
still have maintenance budget within the budget. So the 150 we're spending now, it would come down.
Okay.
But it's going to slowly creep back up over the years
time.
as
Okay,
it degrades.
now I got
So
you. Sorry,
in about
sorry.
3 or 4 years, we'll be back at the 150 on an annual
okay.
basis.
Sorry, I misunderstood. So I would be opposed to spending any one of the three, really, until we get a good ASP in place or get traffic counts. We don't know how many cars and trucks are going up and down that road. We don't have that information yet. So I'd be, if we're going to spend anything, do the 65, but that would be the most.
So sorry, Riley. You're telling me we're spending $150K right now, every year, maintaining that road. Now, the last time you said it was $1,000 every time we sent somebody out there to grade it. It's not adding up. What is it? I'm sorry, I am getting frustrated at this one because it doesn't seem like you guys have answers for us for what status quo means in here. I'm getting two different things.
So we're spending approximately 150 a year right now.
And how?
So between the grader going out, contract services, so bringing Shawnee out to zipper, and pothole material, a little bit of spray patching, and then the grader costs. So the graders out there during the summer months, so half the year is out there once a week at 6 hours a day, and then the rest of the year it's significantly less, like once a month.
Okay, so 100. Shawnee's not expensive to have them go out there and zip and put it back together. So any of these three numbers, if we were to do any of these three, the 65, 125, or 1.25 would be additional to the 150.
Correct.
Right? So status quo is 150K that is already in our operating budget.
Correct.
Correct? So there would be no increase anywhere. It would just be status quo. So I'm going to go around the table. Starting with Michael. Status quo? Jenny? Status quo? Status quo? Status quo? Status quo. We're staying with status quo. Next one. Jennings Road.
64th Street paving. This is $1.95 million. This would be paving to a rural cross-section, center crown of the road with ditches on either side, and it would be a dust-free permanent surface.
No. There's my vote. Next, Michael.
Yeah, no, I think you guys all know where I sit on this one, but how is 1.95 paving and dust-free and we get 1.25 on the other? I'm sorry I'm bringing up the other road again, but how do you get 1.25 for gravel and oil versus pavement at 1.95, and it's smaller stretch of road on 1/12th than it is on 64th? Like, I'm not dumb at math, but this seems, there's some really weird numbers going on.
Riley, do you?
Sorry, off the top of my head, no, I don't know the difference. I'd have to pull the estimates.
Anyway, thanks for letting me have a little.
Always. Kelly.
Thank you. So I'm just curious about this 64th, like if you're looking to, I guess my question was similar to the 1.95 and the numbers, but if we're looking at it as a, yeah, never mind, it's okay. No.
Like this is another one that's got an ASP on it. Absolutely nothing's happening, but we do have one development that could go at any moment in time. Correct? What do they call that? The Highlands?
Highland Ranch?
No, over on 64th.
Oh, yeah.
The Highlands, the little pocket community, whatever he calls it.
Yeah.
You know, and so yeah, I'm not interested in paving it just because we have it. So with all this other future development in play here. Jenny?
Thank you, Mayor. I am a no for 1.95 million, but I would like to make sure that it is still maintained at a status quo so we can drive it.
Yeah, and the maintenance is still within the budget for the status quo.
Okay, because when I drove it this morning, there were 7 cars on it at one time. Just a FYI.
Kelly?
Just one other question with regards to the cost of the maintenance there. I mean, if it's already in the budget, do we know what we're spending to maintain that stretch of road?
Sorry, I don't have the maintenance costs on that portion of road.
Great. Okay, thank you.
12th Avenue. Oh, you're going to go around the horn again?
Yeah. Councillor Barton? No? Kinghorn?
There you go. But in the future though, Riley, could you maybe look at 64th and see if there's something we can come up with just to make it a little more user-friendly, I think. I don't know much about building roads or that sort of thing, but I've driven it a number of times, and it's a pretty brutal road, and if we have people using it, and I assume you're going to do traffic counts on that, or I thought we were going to do traffic counts on that from the last meeting.
That was the request from the last meeting, and Chris has agreed to do travel counts on both 112th and 64th.
Yeah, if you can get those numbers to us and maybe come up with something that's a little bit, I know we can't put it in the budget today or tomorrow, but something that makes the road a little bit better.
Brenda?
Thank you. Again, I'm in the same position as everybody else, another $2 million on a road that we haven't yet determined its use. but I'm going to say the same thing I said before, level of service. We own these roads. However we got them, wherever they came from, it doesn't matter. The people that live here use them all the time because they believe they're part of the community. So hopefully the money that you've got set aside in the budget is enough to maintain them to a level of service that is maybe acceptable. I'm not saying, you know, but it needs to be maintained properly until we do finish the development part of it. I think that we've left it undone a long period of time with all of the projects working around it, but that has left us with very poor roads.
Okay, now, we can't spend 15 minutes on every single one of these, so here's my thing when I'm looking at this new capital wish list. We've got $36 million in carryovers on capital projects from last year, which includes the aquatics expansion of 26, so then there's another 10. Also includes the 2.9 million reserve transfer to the wastewater, and it also includes 1.5 of the large arena. We've got a lot, even in just getting the aquatics expansion completed, going on for this year. Now there's definitely some pieces that are just maintenance that have to absolutely happen in my mind. One is the downtown pavers. In order to have nice things, you do have to maintain them. So that one, the hot sea, making sure that our staff have the equipment they need, because if we get frozen drains in the springtime, we have to have they have to have the ability to get them thawed out and draining. Crescent Ave, to me, that's always important, that we're making sure people's infrastructure is working properly, and that one's kind of the next on our ongoing list of, we always have old infrastructure that needs to be replaced. And the other one was the breathing apparatus for the air compressor. Is that right, Chris? Our fire department has to have the right equipment. So those are kind of the key ones for me. So open it up to others that have, but I don't, there's a lot of stuff on here that's just, to me, not even on the radar for this year. So, Councillor Kinghorn?
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. Yeah, I would concur on most of what you said, but I would also add in the 11,000 for hearing protection for our fire department. I think that that's pretty important. I've been talking to the guys a little bit, and it is certainly an issue over there. And then the one that's the more bigger one that I'd like to hear what the rest of the council has to say about it, but the George Lane washroom design and replacement, that has been in pretty rough shape for a long, long time. And it is a jewel in our community, and I think that doing some work over there is a good investment in our infrastructure. And the rest you already covered off that I would certainly support. Oh, the software one though, how important is that software one for the ActiveNet replacement? Chris, I circled that one as saying that it's probably worthy of doing, but I'd like to hear you.
Yeah, and on Friday we got a revised quote, or a final quote from the company we want to move to, and it's substantially less than the 125 that you see there. And it's something that we feel can fit within the existing operations as we transition away from ActiveNet to intelligence. And we can fit that within operations, so it can come off the list.
I was going to say, so you're going to move that into operational costs. Thank you.
It's actually only about a $20,000 actual cost to implement and purchase the software.
Councillor Jones?
Thanks, Mayor Snodgrass. So just to confirm, everything on this list under cost was over and above the budget?
That's correct.
Okay. The only other one that actually I'm really interested in looking at and doing is the Wellisville pathway realignment. It has, like, come winter, anybody who has to walk, and it's the only way to get from one side to the other, it is treacherous, it is terrible. I'd really like to see that one worked on, even if it takes a year or two to do. I would like to see something in the works for that. That's really important to me after seeing what some people have had to walk through this past couple of years.
Anything else, Kelly, that's important to?
Thank you, Mayor. I didn't hear you mention it, so my apologies if you did. The Fountain Tire berm naturalization. If they're having drainage concerns, I think is that one going to become a pretty big priority pretty quick?
Can you explain that one to me a little bit more, Chris, as to where this is coming from? Because it's been there for a few decades, and now all of a sudden it's a problem.
Yeah,
Why?
and that's kind of where we were when it first came up. But apparently, some of those businesses along there are experiencing flooding during heavy rainfalls because the berms creates
Businesses or business?
business.
Just Fountain Tire, correct? Are they the ones that are,
That's the only
like,
one
if
I'm
it's the
aware of.
whole thing that's flooding?
I think isn't it the old trust building too?
I've only had one complaint from.
I think engineering, I believe, has had it from the trust owner as well.
So
Now, here's my question. Is it because the berm exists there and they're saying all this water is coming off the berm, or is it the grading? Is it contributed to poor grading on their own property as well?
I can't answer that.
I can give an option.
Like, I'm okay with, like, I'm not okay with doing it right now because I don't think there's enough information as to what the actual problem is.
So I would suggest we bring the drawings to council. We have some options. The design consultant has done the original design, which is what's been priced out. We've asked them to reevaluate for options. We could bring that back to council. And then there'd be a bit more explanation behind the project, some options with it, and council can choose from there.
Yeah, like, you're looking for $1.2 million for Fountain Tire berm naturalization. That's a big number. I need to know a little bit more as to where the actual problem is, and we haven't seen a design or anything, so. Because there's 100,000 in from last year for the design. Is that complete?
Yeah, we're at 90%, Riley?
Okay, well, let's get that completed, and as far as I'm concerned, we can talk about this next year. The new council can. Councillor Walsh.
Thank you. Can we know a little bit more of the history that brought this? It's identified in here as one building. Conversations suggest there's more than one building affected with the runoff from this berm. And then is it our responsibility for the berm, or is it landscaping or grading of the property owner? Like, understanding the whole thing, other than just the...
Exactly, yeah.
We can bring back that information. We'll bring back the design drawing so you can understand what the issue is, and so that you can get a better picture on what has to take place.
Mm-hmm. As well as the communication from the business owners or residents in the area that are bringing this forward. Like, how did we get here from there?
Sorry, you'd like to hear from the two owners? Would you like to hear from the two owners?
No, just what information you gathered to determine it's just those two business owners that are affected by this.
Yes, we can do that.
Thank you.
A lot of money. Okay, yeah, but let's get the design done, get some more information. Now, one question on here as a 2025 new, you've got the cemetery ribbons that was completed last week. So
Yeah, we removed that from that list.
That
list
did
was
come out?
Yeah, that list that you have was.
because we advanced
yeah,
that.
We
earlier,
advanced
right?
that,
Okay,
yeah.
so that's
We
good.
revised the list and sent out council and the public a revised list last week.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Nychuk?
Yeah, the consultant's report, I'm less concerned about somebody surveying elevations and giving me elevations. I want to know what the problem is. Like the consultant stuff, I can imagine is going to be design and elevations and why it's all wrong because some engineer that does elevation says it's wrong. I want to know what the problem is from those property owners and what they're dealing with.
The air handler for the small arena, Chris, how,
Yeah, that was supposed to
Urgent
be
is that?
the chiller, and actually it's been deferred. In the email that I sent out end of last week, the chiller has had an assessment done on it by StarTech. The thickness of the walls, based upon their testing, gives us another at least 12 to 18 months of that chiller. So it's a 2026 project for a conversation at that point, and we will be doing an annual assessment like we do on all our ammonia handling, an annual assessment on that chiller, and we'll be able to understand exactly when we have to change that out.
okay. Jenny's request of the Wallaceville pathway realignment. I'm not seeing it on our list, am I?
Should be there, 300 grand.
Where is it?
Page 29.
And that's being funded from gas tax.
Okay, sorry, there it is. Found it. No, it's not, because we're using the gas tax. Ooh, are we not?
We haven't had that conversation.
Correct. Okay, and then the software that Jamie was asking about,
The revised quote we received on Friday or Thursday or Friday last week has it at around $20,000 for the new system implemented. Based upon the charges that we get through ActiveNet, we'll see cost savings by switching from ActiveNet, and we have to keep ActiveNet up until next October because we just signed a one-year term again. And so that changeover will be occurring starting in July-ish. So at the end of the day, we feel that there'll be a savings within the operations side that will cover that cost.
okay, now in this,
Michael?
sorry, Michael, go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Snodgrass. Did I hear right? You got a new quote at 20 and the number that was in front of us was 125? Is that?
It's I guess it's the final quote. It's the final quote from the original estimates that we put together. And so that's the number.
Holy jeez.
And that, so sorry, that's the software ActiveNet replacement.
Yeah.
And you're saying it's gone from 125 to $20,000.
That's correct.
Sweet.
Actually, I thought you said it was strucken from the budget because we're going to put it in
We're
operations.
going to take it out of the
It's not
budget, put it in the
gonna be capital.
operation side. Yeah. We don't need it in the capital conversation.
Okay. So that one comes out of here, right? Okay. Downtown pavers. Where's the number? I've got a bolded downtown paver stone rehabilitation carry forward of $100,000. Is that just continuing on?
That's going to continue on. We put, at the end of the day, that should be rolled into operations, and every year about $80,000 should be allocated to a downtown paver renewal.
Okay, so it's not a capital project, it's going to be normal
It's an-
operations as it should be.
Yeah, it's a new level of service, but it's normal operations.
Okay.
And that will be a diminishing number over a period of time too.
Okay. One last one here. The hot seat, help me out quickly. There it is, 20K. So, new capital projects I've got at 706,000, being the Crescent Avenue design, the new hot seat, the air compressor at 60, hearing protection at 11, George Lane Park washroom, that's design, correct?
Correct.
At 250. And Wallaceville pathway realignment, design and study at 300. Total of 706.
Sorry, Mayor Snodgrass, if I can.
Go ahead.
That, it says design and replacement for 250.
Design and replacement?
That's what it says on my thing here, design and replacement for 250.
That's an error.
I am not in favor of spending $250,000 just to design a porta potty.
Okay, let's just do design then. What's your estimate on that?
No, how much is design then?
Design,
20?
We'll move it down. This will be I guess the vision for George Lane washroom replacement is to make it an all-season washing facility. So we have to understand what the servicing is to that building, and whether or not council wants to have all-season washrooms. I guess that's a conversation where we need to start, because we've heard from the public that all-season washrooms are important, and finding solutions to that would be. So this is not an outhouse or a pit privy by any stretch of the imagination, but it's making it all-season, all-weather, renewing it, and design works is probably in the ballpark of about $100,000 to complete detailed design, unless we can find or purchase something that has been built elsewhere, like Fish Creek Park, as an example, and bring something and copy a design from somewhere else.
Okay. Well, let's just nick that one until you find out, get us a quote on the design. Okay? So I'm at 456, new capital. Wallaceville is in there. So that, okay, Wallaceville pathway realignment at 300, that's full build out? Estimate?
That's the quote.
Okay, that's fine. Hearing protection, air compressor, we got all the important ones in there.
Can we have a specific conversation, because this one comes up each and every year? Emerson Lake landscape design. We have concerned residents around Emerson Lake that bring this up and present to council on a regular basis, and council sends us back to come forward with a plan. This is the plan to naturalize Emerson Lake.
Okay.
Whether or not that stays in the budget, we would like to have that specific at this, whether it stays in or stays.
That's
or
design?
goes. That is design.
Okay, at how much?
30,000.
I'm totally okay with that. Councillor Nychuk?
I think I'm with you and I'm okay with it, but I just want to understand what that is. Because I just spent a little bit of a morning walking with one of the residents and going right around the lake and looking at every tree and every shrub and the history behind what's happened in that person's opinion, what's happened over time. And from that perspective, it seems like we've told people a lot of things and done some things, and maybe it's happened, maybe it hasn't. And what will this plan give us? Do we know that? Because there's a vision that some people have, right? And I think there's been a direction from council as to how we want that property to be. It's never going to be Disneyland, and we're not going to have flower plantings and all. It's not going to be a park. It's not Bouchard Gardens out on the coast. But what this landscape plan will give us. Thank you.
Let me just jump in and piggyback with Michael. Is that over the years we've had one person come and talk to us about this. we got to be very careful in spending a whole pile of money just because one person doesn't like it. Like, there's the majority, is that not right? Like,
Yeah, we're gonna just be black and white, yeah.
yeah,
I'm not up for spending $1 million there. I would just like to give somebody an answer, right?
exactly. So that's,
I'm not fighting the naked part.
I'm totally okay with doing a little bit of a design and seeing what the future might hold for that thing. But we got to be very careful that just because somebody's coming in here and wants it to be different, there's 15,000 people in this town, and most of them quite like Emerson Lake. I go up there, use it myself, and watch all the people walk around it. We have one person. It's kind of like 12th Avenue, right? I got one person that's asking for us to spend 1.2 million on a certain section just because he thinks it would look better. Be careful. Sorry, Brenda.
Thank you. The naturalization of an area, it's somewhat conflicting to me that we need to do a study on the naturalization of the area. Sorry, just in principle. But what I've heard in the presentations from the public about this area was a frustration with us continuing to plant trees and things to support a vision, and they keep on dying. So we could just stop planting things there and naturally evolve with the land, and when the trees die, take them out, put things there, whether it's a raised bed or a pot or whatever it is, to create it over time. But to spend a whole bunch of money to prove that we already know the plants are dying because we tried to create a landscape in an area that wasn't conducive to that. So, you know, shy of that, we could plant a maple tree and see if it grows. But so we just have to stop putting things there and let it take its course. That's my thought.
I'll try and be as politically sensitive as I possibly can on this topic. This is never going to be a golf course. And I think the disconnect on the vision with individuals striving to see that kind of level of maintenance and level of service is just not going to happen. I agree that if something dies, we don't plant it back. We see what happens. If we can't maintain a tree or a shrub and it dies, then we shouldn't be planting it from that perspective. So I think we need to be very careful on that. I don't think, from my opinion, that this is a high priority. This made the list because it came out of a committee of the whole meeting for staff to come back with a plan. And this is our attempt to say, here's the plan, to engage somebody to help us with a plan to convey to the public. But it's also just as easy to say, hey, that park is the way you see it right now is going to stay the way it is.
Councillor Barton.
Just pulling on my professional experience in that industry, and I think what we're proposing to do with the design is probably the best thing to do. This is not something, honestly, that this council is probably going to tackle, but if we've got information at hand to be able to tackle it in the future. I don't think it as big as what everybody think it is. There's just a lot of we need to understand what we actually have there, like the soils for one, and actually just letting a lot of things go back into a native state. But we're also maintaining it right now, right? We're mowing it every probably 2 weeks or whatever the case is. And I think the design and the report that we get back from them is going to be helpful, and then we can figure out what the next move is. And like I said, it's probably not going to be us. So thank you.
Thanks, Jamie. Jenny.
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. I think part of it was our bylaw states that if a tree dies, it's replaced within 2 years. So following that bylaw, which is expected by some people, that's what's happening. So I think that does have to be considered if they're replacing them and they're not taking. That is a waste of money. And when Darlene spoke, my understanding, or what I saw her, was asked for some help. This wasn't her, she didn't understand at all, and it was a little bit outside her scope. And I remember her asking that she needed help to do this. So if that's what some of this money would do, I think that's okay.
And I'm not going to interpret Darlene's statements, but I think what she was looking for was the support of council to support what she's doing there right now. And I think that got kind of confused into this, creating this landscape design. Now, I think, you know, at the end of the day, we do have to take a look at some of our policies and how we deal with some of our landscapes. And in some areas, we do need to take a look at what the soils can host and cannot host. 100% agree with Councillor Barton on that, because there's nothing worse than planting non-native species that we have to baby to make sure they survive. And, you know, when we take a look at the environments that we're trying to create here, some of them are non-native. This was a native grassland area along a river corridor that had water that saw certain things grow. And so we need to be very cognizant of those species. And we need to be cognitive of understanding what we're trying to grow and trying to do here. And we can place trees, as many trees as you want, right? And I love trees, don't get me wrong, but at the same time, if we can't maintain them and keep them healthy for a 5, 10, or 15-year period, then the value's not there. And we're just putting bad money after good.
So do you think this is something Darlene can take on and come up with a design that we can support her with?
I actually think it's a policy statement, honestly. I think it's to say that we are going to support naturalization of our public park spaces.
Okay. I'm in agreement with that.
And what that means, so we can clearly communicate the vision of what that actually means to the public.
So you're saying no design necessary?
I would say give it to us to develop a policy that we bring back to council on what we want to see for our park spaces.
Councillor Smith?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to throw my 2 cents worth in. I think if we were looking at Wallaceville versus Emerson in terms of need in the community, I think we have a real health concern for the walkability of the pathway currently through Wallaceville. So for me, the priority on this list as it stands would be to address the Wallaceville piece. I think I appreciate the community's input at Emerson Lake, and I think that policy is probably the way to go there. But I think if we're looking at our allocation of our resources and our staff time, to me, Wallaceville is the priority. Thank you.
Councillor Kinghorn?
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. I don't want to drag this out a whole bunch more, but when I look at design, that sort of infers that we're going to do something once we get a design back. And my feeling about this particular area is you gas this and let it go back to nature. Let it go back the way it was. If you look at old pictures around High River, there were no trees. There are cottonwoods along the river, and that's it. So anytime we try to plant a tree, that's not native to our area. So I'm going to say gas the design, keep doing what we're doing. Don't stick trees in there that die again, and just let it work its way out for right now. But I would gas even the design.
Jeez, going out hard, aren't you? Hey, you're just going to chuck a couple
23 more
grenades in your pockets. Oh, Councillor Walsh.
Thank you. I too will keep it quick. I agree that Wallaceville is probably one of the biggest priorities, just because the people that use that path, they often don't can't drive, or they don't have a car, and I too see people at risk there. And Darlene's approach with this park, if her work practice is now trending to naturalization, and whatever support she needs to learn and get there, 100% I support. But again, every time we hear of we need to do a study or we need to gather some information, I worry that we're going to spend $30,000 on what we already know. We need guidance, and we need to be trained in as Councillor Barton stated, we certainly need that. But I think if we're on the right path to naturalization, we can move along at that pace. But Wallaceville, I think, should be, that pathway needs to be at the very top of our agenda.
So Wallaceville is in for sure. It's not going anywhere. So it's whether we want to do Emerson or not. Barton.
I'm in with Wallaceville as well, and I'm going to drag out Emerson just one more time. I think the answers for Emerson Lake are actually right in front of us, and it doesn't necessarily need to have a full design. I know just with people that I consult with on a regular basis, I think one of the answers is just to get a simple soil test, and then you design through people. You could even do a test plot, right? We could have an area out there where we could try and do a test plot of the type of grasses it will grow and actually will survive. And the reason why I say the answer is right in front of us is if you'll actually look, if you're walking down the north end of the lake and on the path, what's right next to us on the Lansdowne lands, I believe it is a wetlands, and that's exactly where the soil came from, is from there. So it's a wetland, and there's definitely trees that will grow, and there's lots of things that we can put in there, but I think I'm still in favor of a design, but I also understand that if we got to nick something, that's probably going to be it. And I think soil tests and just maybe some simple operational things that we could find out would be sufficient, right, to keep moving this forward. Because I think if we can just make incremental changes over time, be healthy. We're not irrigating it, under my opinion.
On the record. Well, why don't we bring this back with your idea of having a policy around so that people know what we're doing, and we'll get Darlene's guidance on that, like what Jamie's saying about the soil tests, stuff that's as simple as that to kind of start to help. And what does Darlene need to be able to move this forward as things change up there. So Emerson Lake is out. So for capital projects, I have Crescent Ave at 65. I got the HOTC at 20. I got the air compressor at 60. Hearing protection at 11. I have George Lane Park washrooms. We need a design quote on what that looks like. And the Wallaceville pathway realignment, we've got that allocated at 300. So that's kind of the biggest one, of course. Total of 456,000. Pretty small. For additions, we have a big capital budget, of course, for all the carryovers from last year. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm curious about the ones that are TBD in our package here, particularly page 23, the fire sprinkler system assessment and the library outdoor improvement, because I know we've had conversations around improving the library, and I know that we've had fire suppression conversations. Do we have a sense at this point what that might look like by way of cost?
So I can't speak to the library the fire suppression systems. That's going to be building by building. We learned from our experience with the library that there has to be more increased due diligence from our facility staff to be cognizant of our fire sprinkler systems and which buildings have it and what kind of maintenance it does require. So that's why it's TBD at this point in time, because it's going to vary from building to building, and which ones have to be caught up and which ones can be deferred a year or two. As far as the library outdoor space, the front of the building, it's a combination of issues, and we've got a concept design underway of dealing with a multiple level of issues, from lighting to parking to icing of sidewalk to stormwater drainage, and we'll have a concept hopefully by the end of the year that then we can figure out what the budgetary price actually is and how we can phase it, because it's not going to all be done in 1 year. There are some simple solutions to solve for the interim, for example, for lighting concerns for the library by putting, a floodlight on the front of the building that shines in that direction. So there's some simple solutions that are cost effective that we can do in the short term, but certainly it's a much more complicated, and the winter, once winter hits there, we lose, the parking depth is just not sufficient for how busy that road actually is and the stormwater challenges that we see along there. And the icing of the sidewalk is a big one too. Yeah, it may not be a budgetary item for next year. We may defer it to 2026 as well once we see the concept developed and the phases.
Again, I think the library piece, if it's icing up, that's a health and safety concern that should be a priority piece, in my opinion, because there's a lot of folks with mobility challenges that access the library.
We have increased maintenance over there so that we can tackle those issues. So it has become a higher priority both in the parking area for snow removal as well as the sidewalks.
Okay, thank you.
Brenda.
Thank you. I might have just missed it, but the piece of sidewalk from 7th Avenue on completing First Street Southwest, that seems like a pretty small piece or low-hanging fruit that could be accomplished.
$320,000 is the quote, and it was not discussed at this point, but it's on the list.
So I didn't miss it.
Okay, you started it.
All right. Well, I do think that it would make a big difference to completing that stretch. We've done such a good job with everything else. I know that the businesses in what is now called Rodeo Plaza, they really are working together to be a force and be noted there at the end of the block. And it looks like a disconnect to me. It looks like we didn't quite finish the downtown core, because we start everything. When you come in for the parade, it starts right there. It looks forgotten. So I would like to see that happen.
So that's in at $320,000. Conversation. Councillor Kinghorn.
Although I agree with Councillor Walsh on the appearance and how it looks over there, and it would be, to me, it's a nice to have. It's not a need to have, and this year, given everything that's going on and what we're trying to do, I think we need to focus on need to haves opposed to nice to haves, and make sure it's on the priority list for the 2026 budget, I guess it would be, so the next council. And hopefully Council Walsh is present and can put her points forward then. Thank you.
Respectfully, thank you, Councillor Kinghorn. I would like to give it just a little bit of a push, and rather than we know it's not a need, but we should. It's not quite nice. We should.
Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just curious, it says CCBF grant in the funding for this, possible? So if that's the case, it's not coming out of our, where's the grant coming? What is a CCBF?
It's our gas tax.
Okay. So it's still
It's our funding.
our funding, okay. That's a little different then. There's no transportation grants or any other additional federal money for something like this?
Not for this currently, no.
Okay.
What was it you said the grant related to?
Basically, I use it as the short term. It's called, it was the former gas tax. Gas tax?
Sorry, Michael.
Thanks, Mayor. I too see it as a nice to have rather than a need to have, and then it also brings up into my mind Center Street. I would probably prioritize Center Street over First if we were going to spend some money. You know, part of Center has been completed too, and it's not done, and that's the main thoroughfare. So. Yeah, if we were talking about spending a bunch of money, I'd want to bring that into the conversation about which stretch of road. I think both of them need to be done at some point. I agree with you, Councillor, that it looks unfinished, but we've got a couple of pieces that are there yet unfinished. And then in between, the green space that's in between, we had way back, we had an initial kind of design plan that O2 did for us way back when they were helping with the downtown rebuild, and that still sits there. It's not completed by any means, but it was just a concept, and all of that needs to kind of still continue and be in front of council as the days and months and years go on. So.
Okay. So First Street, Southwest Connector. In or out? Sorry, I was talking to him too. You're out. Out. Barton's out. Craig's in. Kelly's out. Brenda's in. We lose Brenda. Okay. That's on for, keep it on for next year because it does have to be done. Okay, cool. Councillor Smith.
Thank you. One other item that I see here that I don't think we've talked about, or maybe you said it and I didn't hear it, the building roof maintenance, the public works. Shop, work plan for annual maintenance, page 21, 45,000 annually. Is this an ongoing or is this a new?
It's a new level of service to increase building facilities, to monitor our roof structures because we have majority flat roofs so that they are constantly in good condition and minimizing leaking damage and mold buildup.
So what does a work plan for that mean?
Again, the work program is setting up the system to monitor our buildings as well as inspections by qualified roofing companies or roof inspectors. Actually, they're independent roof inspectors that suggest what certain maintenance schedules that we have to put together for our flat roofs.
So this is only for the public works?
No, it's for multiple roofs.
Multiple roofs.
Public works is our priority right now because it's one of our older ones, but.
Okay, so does that 45,000 involve other buildings or just?
It will.
It will. Okay. So this building?
This building will be one of them. CCMC will be one of them. Culture Center will be one. Fire Hall. All our lift stations that have flat roofs.
Okay.
So. All roofs. All the roofs. All the roofs.
So it's a little more comprehensive than just public works?
Yes.
I see.
It's specific because that's the one that right now is the oldest.
Okay, thank you.
Not unless you want, you tell me to. How much is it?
45K.
45K? All right. We'll open it up. Councillor Kinghorn.
I'm by no means an accountant, but to me this is more of an operational thing than a capital, and I think it should be I see you looking at me, but you're not nodding or doing anything, so would you agree that it should be an operational, or, because it is in the capital, but that my understanding of a capital budget wouldn't include something like an ongoing building maintenance. I do see one nod, thank you.
It would be inappropriate for me to agree or disagree, Councillor, but I would suggest that the list that you have before you is capital and special projects. Capital, operating, and special projects. It's not just a capital list, and that's why we have operating as a classification.
Councillor Nychuk?
To further carry on Councillor Kinghorn's comment, this surprises me that this is here, that this isn't part of operational consideration already, that it's part of a preventative maintenance plan. So I don't know why we weren't having this somewhere within the operational budget, and that it's coming up as a specific $45,000 annual spend now. So we're going to inspect every building roof every year and pay a inspector 45 grand to tell us the condition of the roof. Simply, that's the way I'm reading this.
Yeah, that's not necessarily the case, because certainly some roofs could be in much better condition than others. For example, BSRC, 100% brand new roof on the entirety of it now. I think it's complete, Riley, correct?
99%.
99% complete. At the end of the day, we've got a brand new roof there. So you build in this cost into the operation side because it's a special project, a new level of service that we're introducing that will have that on a cycle of 5 years, say, for example. But then there'll be other roofs, like the older ones like Public Works, which we don't necessarily want to replace, but we may inspect it annually and just do minimal patching because we know that we want to replace that building in the future in another location. If that makes sense, Councillor Nychuk? And you're absolutely right, it should be an operating, but it's also identifying a new level of service that we want to have a conversation with council.
So yeah, it somewhat makes sense. I guess I equate it to a personal level where I've got 2 buildings with flat roofs, and I'll bring a roofing company in to have a look at it. I'll bring, well, more than one. I usually get 3. They'll have a look at it every year, and if it needs some work, then I'll contract one of them. But they all come under the premise of, if you look at it and you give me a good quote, you might get the work. Because we've got multiple buildings, maybe that scenario just doesn't work quite as well as my little scenario. So.
And unfortunately, municipalities get treated much differently than private business, so we have to monitor that.
Okay. In or out? In? Jenny? In? Okay, roof repairs in. Anything else? Going once, going twice. Sold. Bag of potatoes, $3,400. PTSD. Okay. 501,000. We have to reiterate. Crescent Ave, the Hot Sea, air compressor, hearing protection, Wallaceville, pathway realignment, roof repair, 45. In total is 501. All good? We can move on past that one. So Q&A, I want to go back to, unless there's anybody else has anything. The proposal I put forward there last meeting about the aquatics financing and how we can revisit that now, and in a lot better way in my mind. But there's also discussion around a few numbers as to what council's comfortable with. So I'm going to be sending this spreadsheet to yourself and Chris. It's not an earth-shattering spreadsheet. It's all pretty simple, but just to get tight numbers on it. I know this. I've been putting numbers in here through discussion and asking questions and everything, but the one that caught me, David, was when you talked about the tax stabilization reserve today. Because previously I had 3.989 million in here. And then today I'm hearing 6.8. So where are we at? Which one?
So the pure tax stabilization is approximately 4 million. We redefined tax stabilization to include all operating reserves that we had.
Okay.
And so that's how we get to the.
So the actual account that we could access if council wished for this is 3.98.
4 million.
4
Yes,
million.
sir.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much for clarifying. Now the other one, and I've had a couple of conversations with a couple of you, just regarding the local improvement tax that might be placed on this plan. You have options from 0 to whatever you want. I think 147 would be the top, because that's kind of where the financing model would come. That's the only reason why I have that one. If we were going to do that 30-year loan through the government, which so that's where the 147 came from. You could also do 0 and just using the other debentures to fund it. If you did 0, you'd be around 12 years to have the whole thing paid off. But that's also not, it's 12 years on the long end, because David mentioned the last week that as more properties are built and taxed in town, that speeds that whole thing up. So as growth happens, it speeds it all up. But I want the conversation around the local improvement tax amount and where is everybody comfortable with, I guess. So I got an idea where I'm somewhere in the middle, about $75, but that's per year, per property. Jenny.
Thanks, Mayor Snodgrass. I was going to say the same thing. When you listen to concerns, a lot of the concerns were about the interest rate, and then of course what it would cost per household for that period of time over 30 years. This definitely reduces that amount of time as well as the interest rate, but there's still a cost to doing the aquatics expansion, and I think in between is good for me. I like the $75 a year.
Councillor Kinghorn.
Yeah, first of all, I want to thank Mayor Snodgrass for taking the time and going through and really working through these numbers and presenting us with this spreadsheet. That was very well done, and I certainly appreciate it. I too heard lots of the concerns with respect to the interest rates and paying it over the 30-year time frame, and what that cost would be to our ratepayers. So the plan that you put together, I think, really fits with what the community's looking for, and that the objections that we heard, it takes care of those objections. And I certainly would be an improvement tax of somewhere in that 70 or something like that. I mean, really, you're talking $5 a month or $10 a month, something like that. So that's what I'd be supporting, somewhere in that $70 range, I guess, roughly.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So can you refresh my memory, please, at the $147 amount? That was a 5-year payoff, is that correct? 6. Okay, and then at the $75 would be presumably 9 years to pay it off? 8. Okay. So at 147, this is for the average ratepayer, is that?
This is per property. It's
Per
not an
property.
average ratepayer thing. This is a local improvement tax, so it's one number that gets attached to every single taxable property in High River.
Okay.
So it doesn't vary on the value of your home and the mill rate and all these other things. It's just a local improvement tax. That's just on each property.
So it's $12.25 a month at $147, and it's $6.25 a month at $75.
Correct. So, you know, I think one of the big, pick the number, you're 5 or 8 years, it's, the important thing is when we do these debentures is that municipal government is really good at just keeping it after the debenture's paid off. I've never been involved in one that's come off. It's always, we have yet to do that since we added one when we bought the CP lands. And the important thing is that when we do this plan, we lock the future plan in for those tax dollars, because once that project is paid off, that goes back to the taxpayer. It shouldn't just get wrapped in and, oh, it's just another little operating thing. That's what has to get, that's the important thing in my mind that has to. Now, all these debentures can get taken off, and my personal belief is that we leave one amount, and that's the field house amount, that's $611,000 a year, but that gets put into a new reserve account under future recreation. Because these are expensive things that we absolutely have to provide. Nobody said it better than when I first started. Emil Blockland, I said, well, you know, everybody's telling me to operate this thing like a business, and like, give me your thoughts on that. He says, it's not a business. He said, we have to do way too many things that lose money. That's just the fact of the matter is. That's recreation. He said recreation's the number one. And it's just the way it is. They're expensive. They're expensive to build. They're expensive to operate. You cannot charge the user fees to pay for, you can't. Nobody can afford to go play shinny hockey if it's $100 an hour for you to do so. Like, you can't. So that's the thing, that it's not just this, it's the whole future of how we're managing these debentures so that when they're done, it goes back. The people have stepped up, the people have paid, and it's done. It doesn't just get wrapped into just this is general operating money now that council has available. I think that has to be spelled out clearly. So
So once the 6 years, $147 or $75 a month is paid, that's it?
That's done.
We're done?
That's done.
It's paid for, thank you very much.
100%.
Okay.
And same with the, what is right now the Highway 543 debenture of $268 and the CP Lands debenture of $197. All three of those go back.
Gotcha.
People are done paying.
Okay.
But we have to be responsible at the same time in making sure we've got a reserve account that's being built up. Councillor Nychuk.
Thanks, Mr. Snodgrass. From my chair, I like this financing opportunity over the traditional that you were just speaking about. I like the local improvement tax because it's a short term. The thing that I'd like to have a little time to consider is having some just discussion with the public. And I'm not saying in a public hearing or open forum, just me as a counselor, just out in the community saying, hey, what do you think about this, or what do you think about that, just to get a pulse. I think the $75 on an annualized basis is pretty reasonable, but that's me coming from my perspective. I would like to be able to talk to others and see if that's the same temperature. I don't want to make that decision just from where I sit personally. So I'd like to be able to take that out and have a few conversations. So.
No, that's fair. So now that if we're all settling on that $75 mark, then this will get sent to David, and you can bring it all together with not my shitty spreadsheet. So you can make it look nice. Councillor Barton.
Thank you, Craig. I just got a question that you mentioned there's 3 debentures, and there's what are they again? It's Field House?
So the Highway 543.
Yeah.
That'll be paid off in 2025. So that's $268. Then the CP lands.
Yeah.
That'll be paid off in 2025. That's $197. And just to remind everybody, that's the land that we purchased from CP after the flood from border to border in High River. So all of that CP lands is town owned. And then the third one was the field house at 611.
Okay. So my question, and this is, I don't expect anybody to have the answer for this, but just as an example, I think you said field house is 611,000. And if that's something that goes back to the taxpayer, what does that translate into annual payment for on the average, right? You're using 470, whatever it is for your average. What is that number? Do you know what I'm getting at for each one of those items?
Yeah, if you let us take that away, we can come back to council to go.
Okay, that'd be good, because the only reason I brought that up, and this is a little bit of a segue, but I've had more conversations or I've read more things lately about people talking about how High River's tax rate is high, but if those debentures are part of that tax rate and they get peeled off, they're not really comparing apples to apples, is what I'm saying, right?
That is correct, yes.
Okay.
No, that's one that's been discussed for eons, Jimmy, and it is so hard to compare High River to Okotoks.
Oh no, I know. I understand that, but I'm just wondering because I've had properties in Calgary where they have. I'm just agreeing
with you.
Yeah, special tax rates, right, or special assessments, or whatever you want to call it. So, okay, thank you, David.
Got her. Michael.
I just want to throw this out there for flavor. Mayor, you mentioned that once those debentures are paid, we could, for lack of a better term, reverse that off the taxation. Again, I would like to go to the residents in terms of this is part of your tax contribution on an annualized basis already. Yes, we've paid off this outstanding loan. Is there consideration for that funding that's essentially coming from your bank account already to go to a reserve fund? If you know, it's like when you start investing as a young person or wherever you are in life, when you do that and you take $10 out of your paycheck every 2 weeks and you put it wherever you put it, RRSP or whatever, you like to buy Elon Musk stocks or whatever you do. That's your business. But once it's coming out, you start to not recognize that anymore, right? And not to cloud it that it's a hidden thing, but if you're paying it already and it's a small amount of your taxation, are we best suited as a community to take that we're already all paying and we're comfortable with, let's just say, for the most part, And we take that and we put it into specific reserves like you were talking about. So once it's happening, it's rolling already. I think I would like to talk to the public about that and say, okay, would you want on this particular year, you would get a tax break. So if we were going to have a 5% tax increase, we took the debenture away and it becomes a 3.5. Do you want that, or do you want us to have that reserve funding so that we can do things like we're doing here, where we're going to take that tax stabilization fund and we're going to self-fund a project that's multi-million dollars, and we're going to pay it off in a pretty darn short period of time under this premise. Just another consideration that I think I'd like to talk to the public about in consideration of how we move forward. Whether I'm at this chair in over a year or not, I don't know, but hopefully that council could take that up, and just another way of looking at it. As creative as you were with this, Mayor Snodgrass, coming up with an alternative, I think there's some really interesting things that we could do here and be financially forward-thinking as a community.
100%.
Instead of being status quo.
I couldn't agree with you more, and I think it sets High River up in a very unique position that's very different from the way municipalities operate, where they're saving money to. This is a silver lining to this whole thing, that if we do this, it sets High River up for the future to really be able to do great things without having to borrow money from the province and not pay the interest and everything else. I think it's, and like you say, it's the council of the day that's going to make the choice, right? They could want to be tax heroes and give it all back and do a tax reduction that year, or they keep it all. So, Councillor Kinghorn.
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. Sort of in a similar lines. Does it make sense, or maybe you can give me the advice on this, Chris, as a separate line item? Like right now, it's not shown, right, in your taxes, on your tax assessment. It's not shown. So in the future, would it make sense to have a line item called local improvement or whatever it is, so that the ratepayers actually see that and know that whatever period of time that's going to come off their bill as opposed to being lumped in through regular taxes?
We'd have to take a look at our tax forms that get sent out, but I'm accustomed that parcel taxes or local improvement taxes, whatever you want to term them, like a flat tax to a property is a parcel tax. Right? That's what it is. When it's a flat tax like that, it's way easier to define for the public. And if you can place it as an individual item on your tax notice, the public understand it way better. When you get debentures that are mixed into your tax rates and into your general taxation that they can't see, then it becomes muddy and harder to explain. And so if you can have those specific items separated out, and it may be water parcel tax, it may be sewer parcel tax, it may be whatever, recreation parcel tax. When you have those things there, and they understand that they're spending, the 611,000 translates into, I think, a $90 parcel tax. They see that, and that's for future recreation, they can justify it. So if we can make it fit, I think we should.
Yeah,
Thanks, Chris. I think that's the confusion. A lot of times when people look at the tax bill, it's just that's what we're paying for taxes, when really there's other things that are going into that number, so that at the end of the year, we have this community. I would really like to see that if we could do something like that.
That's the real problem, and Mayor Snodgrass had hit the, he hit it right on the spot, is that municipalities are infamous of letting debentures expire and paying them all off and not having the conversation about adjusting taxes down, because it's within the general taxation framework. It's within that mill rate that we talked about earlier today, and it's not specified. Whereas at least with a parcel tax, a quote-unquote parcel tax framework, then you can have that conversation on an annual basis, whether you continue it or not continue it. and that it's more transparent and open to the public for those specific special projects, or asset management is another one that you could potentially do. So there's a multitude of purposes, but I think it's the right choice.
I think you just put it on the tax bill. Local improvement tax pool expansion expires 2028, 2029. Like, and it's easy to do. Like you gotta be careful with how far you go down, because you don't want a tax bill that looks like this, right? That every line item's got a, but like for big projects like that, absolutely, just spell it out right on there. As to what it is, because new residents come to town, they don't know, right? They get a tax bill, and what's this thing all about? Well, you can put it right on there and tell them how long it's for. Back to you.
I'm guessing this is still a Q&A timeframe?
It is, yes. So you want to finish this one up?
Sure,
So
let's
this will
finish
go back
that
to
up first and
David.
then come back.
You guys will tighten that up as to how it comes back to council.
Thanks. One of the questions I had was with respect to the regular budget. We have a utility charge that goes to, I think, Fortis, and who's the other one? Where we charge them so much for using our properties. ATCO, are we talking about changing that at all, or are we going to leave that flat, or am I just being a little too early in asking the question?
We are in the process of finalizing that agreement. We are already at the top level, so we can't go any higher, and council, all they can do is decline it, move it down. And so, I think a great learning experience for all of us around the table was last week at the council meeting when we took a look at the charges associated with the 2 charging stations downtown. The actual power costs were $1,197, I believe, out of the approximately $6,500 of power charges that were being, those are all fixed rates or fixed fees for distribution franchise fees. I mean, yes, we get a credit back of about $1,000, but it's mind-blowing when even on my house, it does not make sense financially to put solar panels on there because of all the distribution charges. Because you can't recoup those.
Thank you.
And any reduction in franchise fee will be a reduction in our revenues.
So that's the thing, you can get, I think we had a resident sent out questioning this, why don't we just get rid of these franchise fees, because I'm looking at my bill that just showed up for my business. I pay $34.41 a month in franchise fees paid to the town of High River, right? They put it right on there to try to, so that's us charging Fortis for their using our property for their infrastructure. So, but they just put it back onto the ratepayer. But it's revenue for us. It's part of our general operating revenue. So, and what did it equate? 2 or 3 million?
Oh, you want to say 1.5.
Something like that? Okay, so whatever it is, 1.5, 2 million. If we say, oh, okay, we're not going to charge that anymore, well, we got to recoup that 1.5 million into our general operating, or slash something. So
Yeah,
it has to
I
come
wasn't
from.
suggesting that we reduce it or
up.
change it or do anything with it, that it stays the same as it was in 2024. The difficulty with it is there's not a lot of people that understand, or not enough communication about what that is on the utility bills. They simply call it a franchise fee, and people look at it as a tax grab. Obviously, there's costs associated to the town when they're using our lands, they're digging it up and they're doing this and they're doing that. There is a significant cost to the town when they're using those lands. So I think it's a fair way to try and recover some of those costs. I just don't agree with the way ATCO and Fortis present it.
Any other questions? See none, hear none. I will go. Meeting adjourned, 3:20.